Welcome to the webcast on critical thinking. I want to spend some time talking about the idea of critical thinking and its importance for clinical practice. One of the things that we know and understand about critical thinking is that critical thinking can be taught and can be learned. And so it's important that we overtly approach the idea of critical thinking because we have for a very long time just provided the ideas and then expected that people would develop critical thinking skills, and that's not always the case. And so I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about critical thinking and what it is and what its relationship is to clinical practice. So Finn, in a presentation in 2018, indicated that the complexity of clinical practice is increasing at such a rate that providing knowledge to students is not enough. They have to be ready to think about why they believe what they believe. It's not what they think that matters, but how they think. I cannot possibly give you enough information to keep you up to date on aphasia for the rest of your career. I can, because it's ever changing, it's ever increasing, it's ever growing, right? So clinical practice is something that requires that you be able to analyze and synthesize what you see in front of you and use what you know plus the information you go and gather and your evaluation of that information to make clinical decisions. And critical thinking is essential for professional growth. So here's a definition of critical thinking. There are lots of definitions of critical thinking. This is the one that was proposed by Finn. And it is that critical thinking is the ability and willingness to assess and make claims and make objective judgments on the basis of well-supported reasons and evidence rather than emotion and anecdote. Critical thinkers are able to look for flaws in arguments and to resist claims that have no support. They realize that criticizing and argument is not the same thing. Criticizing an argument is not the same thing as criticizing the person that's making it. So as you're engaged in discussion boards, as you're engaged in class discussions, right, you want to realize that when someone is asking you questions about your perspective on an idea or your argument for that idea, they are not criticizing you as a person. They are trying to get to the bottom of the argument. Okay? Critical thinking, however, is not merely negative thinking. It includes the ability to be creative and constructive, the ability to come up with alternative explanations for events. Think of implications of the research findings and apply new knowledge to social and personal problems. So it's this ability to look at something and say not only what could be not working well with the way these ideas are being presented, but also what might be alternate explanations for these ideas that would lead us further down the road in terms of research and practice. So what are the components of critical thinking, or some of the components of critical thinking? Well, one component is asking the right questions, asking the questions of yourself, asking the questions of others, and that includes your instructors, right? One of the things that is a bias, that we're not a cognitive bias, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but a bias that I see students do often is, well, Dr. Weisling said, blah, 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 blah. You should always question that what I am saying, there is the possibility that I have misinterpreted it, that I am not the, end all be all. No human being is. So it's not just me, but it's the idea that one human being doesn't have all of the answers. So you want to ask questions like, what are the reasons that this person is presenting this to me? What are the reasons why this makes sense? What are the assumptions that the author is making, right? So if we have a group of people with Broca's aphasia and they're in a study and the author finds that the treatment that they applied helped this treatment group to improve over the control group at a statistically significant level. So what are the assumptions that the author's making? Well, the assumption that one of the assumptions the author is making is that all of these people did in fact have Broca's aphasia, and that none of them would have come out as a different aphasia had they used a different tool to measure what kind of aphasia they had. So if they used the Estabrooks ADP, the aphasia diagnostics profiles, to determine if they were Broca's aphasia or not, and if they had put them onto the WAB, or the Western Aphasia Battery, would they have ended up being a different kind of aphasia? It also assumes that all the people in the study got better, and that, or people might assume that, right? But statistical significance doesn't mean that. It just means that a significant number did, a statistically significant number of behaviors improved. So that's an example of assumptions, assumptions that the authors made, assumptions that the readers might have made. So start to dig into, what are the assumptions here? What are the possibilities? A little bit of that critiquing thing. What are the possibilities that something in here isn't what it looks like it is? How good is the evidence, right? Single case designs. We have a lot of single case designs. There are good single case designs and there are poorly put together single case designs. And sometimes that's all we have. And, you know, we would love to have big studies, but we don't have them. So we have to think about that evidence. If we have a single case design that's only moderately well put together, we can't put as much stock into it as we might, you know, a double-blind, controlled, randomized controlled study. So we have to think about how good is the evidence. And then the question, is there information missing? There's a question mark missing in this PowerPoint, but is there information missing? Is there something we're not being told that if we were being told would change our opinion of what we're learning about? The next component of critical thinking is thinking dispositions, and these are intellectual traits or values, and a couple have been suggested, like sensitivity and inclination. Sensitivity is just your ability to know that you should be asking questions, you should be engaging critical thinking, you should be doing more than completing the project. So the idea that your inclination isn't, oh, I've got to finish this paper, but rather I need to master this material. I need to understand why the authors are coming to the conclusions that they're coming to, or why the author of the textbook has said this particular thing when it doesn't seem to match what I've heard before or what others have told me. So this idea of sensitivity, the idea that you recognize that it is time to critically think, and then the inclination. And that's the idea that you're motivated to do it, that you don't go, well, yeah, I probably should do all those things and I probably should do them now, but I would really rather go have ice cream. So I'm going to go have ice cream because I don't have the inclination to engage. And these intellectual traits or values are unique predictors of a person's ability to evaluate an argument. This sensitivity and inclination is a unique predictor of how well a person does at evaluating the argument, and it correlates very well actually to overall critical thinking skills. And then a last component of of critical thinking that I want to talk about is cognitive bias. Awareness of cognitive bias and fighting against cognitive bias. And so I want to review some of the cognitive biases that are out there that you want to be aware of, and as you're consuming information that you want to be thinking about, am I falling into one of these traps? So Some of the cognitive biases that interfere with critical thinking, and this is from Kidda, but it was cited by Finn, is the first cognitive bias is that we prefer a story to data. So if I told you that I ran 25 subjects and I gave them, or I used a particular treatment with them and it wasn't particularly effective, I didn't find any statistical significance. And then I come to you and I tell you the story of Joe, and Joe was this nice guy, and he was a farmer, and he had an implement business on the side, and he sold these tractors, and he liked to go down to the local cafe, and he liked to talk with his friends and trade these tractors, and I tell you, he used that treatment, and boy did it work for him. It was just, you couldn't believe how his friends thought about how he could talk after he got that treatment. People will defer to the story, not the data. Okay, so all the time I have students say to me, "Oh, I just love your stories. I love your stories." So what that says is that you make decisions based on stories, but not always data. And stories have misperceptions in them. Okay, they have biases of their own. Next, when we search for information, we seek to confirm and not question our beliefs. So if we do a literature review, we do a search, we'll look for a treatment, we find a treatment, we say, oh, okay, yep, that's a good treatment, so I'm going to do more research on that treatment. We don't look for, is there any research out there that says it doesn't work? So if we like a treatment, if a treatment makes sense to us, we will seek information that confirms our bias. We will look only at that information which reinforces what we already believe to be true. Next, we rarely appreciate the role of chance and coincidence in shaping events. The other day I was supposed to meet someone at a local coffee shop, and we were going to have coffee, and I don't know, about 12:30 I thought to myself, oh, I don't have any appointments this afternoon, because I had forgotten about my coffee appointment. I should go to the coffee shop and work from the coffee shop. It'd be such a nicer place to work. It'd be so nice there. And then I thought, oh no, I should stay here. You know, I'll be more focused. I won't get distracted by the people, etc. I'm just going to work here. So then I get this text message, hey, sorry I missed you. I thought we were meeting. And I said, oh, no, I'll be there in 15 minutes. And all the way in the car on the way there, I thought, see, that was something telling me I was supposed to be in that coffee shop. That's an example of not appreciating the role of chance. I had just forgotten the appointment at the coffee shop, and I happened to be a little bit flighty that day and was thinking about, oh, maybe I need a change of scenery, right? So it's a coincidence, but we try to attach meaning to it. Another bias, sometimes we misperceive the world around us. I'm sure you've all seen these experiments. There's a famous one where there's a group, you have a group of people, or you have a person watch this video, and you ask them, there's a group of people in the video and they're throwing a basketball, and you ask them to count how many times the people in white t-shirts pass the basketball. And so the person is watching this video, and they see the people passing the basketball, and they're counting how many times they pass the basketball. And then when the video's over, you say to the person, did you see the gorilla walking through? And they're like, there's no gorilla. And then you go back and replay the video, and sure enough, there was a gorilla walking through the video, but they were so busy counting the number of basketball passes, that they didn't attend to that gorilla in the background. So that's also an example of really selective attention, where you're selecting to one thing and not paying attention to some of the background stuff. And so we can misperceive our world. We can think we see something. We can think we hear something. We think we hear a tone in someone's voice, and we can misperceive the world. We tend to oversimplify our thinking. I am just really terrible about this, and I probably have really bad habits because I pass them on to you. I say, well, there's some really complex ideas about how you can think about this, but I tend to just bring it down to these few main points, right? Well, we do have to get through the day, but when we're thinking about complex ideas, we have to be willing to think in a complex way. And the last thing to remember is that we have faulty memories, and we're going to, we are going to explore the idea of memory a little bit. And so I want you to understand that human beings have faulty memories. We don't remember things. We think we do, but we don't remember things with a really high degree of accuracy all of the time. And so if we use our memory as the source of information, it will sometimes lead us astray. So those are some ideas that I'm hoping you can think about as you approach information, as you approach putting together materials for the course, whether that be discussion board posts or whether that be projects, that you think about how to ask good questions, how to look for the possibilities of assumptions, and then how to avoid these cognitive biases that might be entering into your thinking. Thank you very much for your time.